Another time I was with Swami when he was having his very first hip surgery. He certainly managed to clock very many surgeries during his lifetime. I think he was working out karma for many of us on his own physical body. And this was actually the first major surgery he'd ever had. He was going to have a hip replacement surgery. This was back in the, I think, mid-1980s. And I had not been practicing as a physician for very long, probably just about 3 or 4 years. And it was a rather odd time to try to be a physician based here at Ananda and out here in our little rural area, because the nearest hospital where all the other physicians were was about 15 miles away, and my life couldn't have been much different than theirs. Also at that time in medicine, it was, particularly in our county, it was not so much as we were all doing the same profession. It was almost a little bit more like a club or a guild. And, you know, they all had their offices right next to each other near the hospital. They all lived in the same housing developments, belonged to the same gyms. All their family members were all friends and went to school together. And here I was out living in this spiritual community that was very poorly understood in Nevada County at that time. I think nowadays, if you were to ask a typical Nevada County resident, gee, what do you know about Ananda? They would probably say, oh, I hear it's a fabulous place, and oh, they have a tulip festival that people go to every year. I've been twice, and I'm looking forward to going again this year, and the people are always so just delightful to be around. It was not like that then. It was... And more than once, when I would be introduced to a physician for the first time, the first thing they would say, are you from Ananda? And I'd say, yes, I live there. And they would say, oh, and walk away. So when I went in with Swami for his surgery, I actually said, would you like me to come into the operating room with you and just stand at the head of the table with you while you have your surgery? And he said, you know, I would really appreciate that. So I worked it out with the surgeon. When you go into an operating theater, it's a fairly bustling, active place that's pretty noisy. And it's not just a surgeon and the patient. I mean, there's an anesthesiologist and several nurses that are helping. Often there's an assistant surgeon. So I realized going in there that this was my first time meeting many of these people, their first impression of me as a physician, and was trying to kind of behave myself in a way that I thought would be a good expression of who we were as a community. And really trying to behave appropriately for that setting. So we had Swami on the operating table, and he was listening to some music. We had some earbuds in his ears, listening to some Ananda music. And it came time to anesthetize him. And for any of you who have never seen an operating theater in a situation like this, it's a very bustling place. And there's a lot they need to accomplish in a short amount of time. But there's a fair amount of kind of friendly banter that goes on. And people are talking about what movie they just saw, and, you know, the new pair of shoes they just got, and how their kids are doing in school. And they all know each other. They've done these procedures literally hundreds of times already. So there's not really too much new about it other than it's just a different patient. And the anesthesiologist said, all right, I'm going to go ahead and push the plunger in, and this will put him to sleep. It was a very short-acting anesthetic to initially put someone to sleep before they started breathing for the patient. And so I took Swami's little earbuds off, and I said, okay, they're going to go ahead and inject into your IV some medication that's going to make you really sleepy. And I'm going to be standing here the whole time for your procedure. Is there anything else I can do for you? And he looked up at me, and he just had this blissful smile on his face. And he was already quite deaf by that point, so whenever he talked without his hearing aids in, it was this loud, booming voice. And he just sort of boomed out. He just said, "Peter, people who don't love God, their lives must be so empty." And the anesthesiologist pushed in the medication, and he just went to sleep. And I looked up, and everybody was still doing their jobs, but it was total silence. And no one said a word for about 2 minutes. They just started, they were doing everything that they needed to do, get in position, but no one said a word. And I thought, what a world this is. What a comedy this is. Here's my spiritual teacher, and he has just said something so profound. All I could say to him was, "Yes, Swami." I mean, I felt that down to my toenails. I felt the same way. I wouldn't have imposed that on the other people in the operating room. So he did it for me.